This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 711, 3 Ways to Activate Genius Mode and Creativity, Even at a Distance, with David Dubczak. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, hosted by author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat teacher, Vicki Davis. Did you know that every student and teacher has a genius mode? It just needs a certain spark to ignite it. David Dubczak is a middle school teacher who sparks creativity. His nickname is Creative Dave because he loves helping people discover their own secret genius mode and the creative thinking that will help unlock it. David has been a teacher for the past 10 years at Indianola Middle School. Away from school, he is a creativity coach and consultant, award-winning playwright, and video producer. In today's show, you'll learn 2 types of creative thinking, Divergent and Convergent. You'll also learn 3 ways to activate genius mode and spark creativity, even while teaching at a distance. Well, the clock is ticking, so let's go. Enjoy!
Today we are talking about creativity with Creative Dave. David Dubczak is his name, and he is known as Creative Dave. And Dave, you specialize in talking about genius mode, but could we start off with discussing, what is creativity? How do you define it?
Sure. So my background, besides being a creativity coach, consultant, and speaker, I'm a middle school computer science teacher. And I spent the majority of kind of the early days of my career kind of with a common problem that I think a lot of teachers run into, which is you assign a creative type project, and then what happens is most of the things that are turned in wind up just being copies of the example, right?
Well, yeah, sometimes I have to be careful giving examples too early because they'll just copy it. There's times to look at examples, to be inspired, but it's different to be inspired versus be copying something.
Yeah, sure. And so this was something that really kind of frustrated me early in my career. So I wanted to learn a lot more about creative thinking, and that's where my master's degree journey took me. And now I'm trying to spread the message about how to activate your genius mode with creative thinking. So let's talk about what creativity really is, okay? A lot of people think that creativity just deals with the arts. Artists are creative, drawing, painting, writing, music. But what creativity really is, it's the ability to solve a problem in a way that is novel and appropriate. So novel meaning new, unheard of, never done before, and appropriate meaning actually solves the problem. And so when you look at creativity from that way, now we can open up to creativity in every subject we have in school.
For sure. I mean, we want that in our engineers and scientists, don't we?
Absolutely. Yep. And so creativity involves 2 very important types of thinking. One important type is divergent thinking and then convergent thinking. So diverging literally means to go out, and then converging means to come together. So divergent thinking is, let's say you have a problem and you're trying to find ideas on how to solve this problem. Divergent thinking would be coming up with all of the possible ways you could solve this problem. And, not judging what are good ideas, bad ideas yet. It's just what are all the ways we could solve this problem. And then converging is then taking a look at all of the ways we've come up with and then trying to pick out the best ones.
Oh, I love that because I teach kids to brainstorm and ideate, and I require them to come up with 50 ideas before they can decide on one because they struggle with ideating or brainstorming, and that is divergent thinking?
Yeah, that's called divergent thinking, yep. And yeah, a lot of times some novice creative thinkers, they latch onto their first good idea, right? Or they're stuck just trying to find the good idea when really the first step is lots of ideas. Don't worry about making them good, okay? Just lots of ideas.
Awesome. So that's creativity. What are some common things about creativity in schools that you see as you work with schools around the country?
So what I see is oftentimes, this is kind of a troubling statistic, and there's variations in where you go and whatnot, but oftentimes students spend 90% of their day convergent thinking, okay? So every time you take a test, a multiple choice test, that's convergent thinking, evaluating. Every time you do a worksheet where you're doing answers, that's convergent thinking. Every time you're computing an algorithm from your math class, anytime you're trying to find the right answer, that's convergent thinking. And to do creative thinking, diverging and then converging, the neural networks in our brains responsible for those two types of thinking are different networks that work together. Yeah. If you're spending 90% of your day convergent thinking, you're winding up not exercising the networks in your brain that do divergent thinking.
Wow. So how do we help spark creativity? And of course, so many schools are at a distance right now. I mean, isn't this a great time if kids are at home to inspire some creativity?
Absolutely. It's a great time. And the good news is the things that you can do at a distance are not all that different from what you could do in the classroom. All right. So one thing I kind of wish every teacher would do this. I know many teachers have kind of a bell ringer, beginning of the class type of activity. So my bell ringer is I ask a silly divergent thinking question every day. Okay. Today's question was, what are some other ways you could use a plunger besides unclogging a toilet? Yesterday's was, how could the school benefit from a donation of 1 million ping pong balls? All right. And I say 3 minutes or 5 minutes, as many different answers as you can come up with. Wild and unusual, silly, not looking for right answers. We're just looking for as many as we can possibly come up with.
That's fascinating. And are you teaching at a distance also?
I'm doing a hybrid. I have a group in classroom and I have a group at a distance.
Oh, the infamous hybrid. Well, how do you balance between your face-to-face and your online kids as they're coming up with all these ideas? Do you have some tricks for us there?
Well, I'm in a situation where my hybrid kids are separate. So I'm doing my face-to-face class and then we let out early and then I work with my online kids.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. That's kind of the ideal. Okay, now you have 3 ideas for us or ways to activate genius mode. Is this bell ringer and brainstorming one of those?
Yep, that's number 1. All right. So the silly bell ringer divergent thinking question is one of them. The second one, this has actually been studied by cognitive neuroscientists. Ask students, what have you been curious about lately? Okay. Even past 24, 48 hours, but what have you been curious about lately? Because part of thinking creatively is just being curious and following through on that. Being able to say, gee, what does this do? And then making connections like that. And so talking about our curiosities gets us more in the mindset of actually being curious.
I love that. I like to even talk about what I'm curious about because it's sort of this journey of discovery, isn't it? So what's our third?
The third one, I call it the scamper technique. Scamper is an acronym for substitute, combine, add, modify, put to another use, expand, and reverse. All right. So if you're trying to solve a problem, combine it with something else, right? Or reverse the problem. If it's too big, how would the problem be different if it were too small, right? And so you could Google Scamper really easily, find a bunch of worksheets. But if you have a specific problem you're trying to solve, scampering is a great way to stimulate the creative thinking with that.
Let's focus on your distance students right now. Give us some examples of what you've done in the last week or two. I love the ping pong ball example. That was fantastic. Could you give us a couple more examples of how you're reaching those kids so that they can have a good learning experience and you can spark creativity at home?
Sure. So with my computer science students, we were working on designing an app just to get ideas for good creative apps. I wanted their apps to be useful to either elementary or middle school students. And so we sat down, we had a virtual Padlet that they could add to from wherever they were. And I asked them to think about what is daily life like for an elementary or middle schooler, academic and non-academic, getting to school, opening your locker, eating breakfast, things like that. And then trying to make connections with problems that are encountered in daily life. And then we did the scamper technique on it. And we did that all virtually through Zoom and through Padlet. And through that, we came up with some really creative ideas for apps that they could design.
That's fantastic. So let me ask you this question. As educators around the country and the world experience distance learning, I hope they don't blank. Fill in the blank.
Hope they don't give up. That's a tough one. And I don't think it's in the nature of an educator to give up. I think, educators are the most passionate, hardworking people I know. I guess this goes into our genius mode thing. There are so many problems right now, but every single one of them can be solved. And what you could do is, I say all the time, turn your problems into possibility statements that invite a solution. So this is too hard. Well, how could we make it easier? Right? This takes too long. How could it be done shorter? Things like that. And that's what I hope we wind up with.
Well, we need to unleash our own genius mode and continually be polling and asking our students how things can get better and be part of the solution together, because we're just in such new territory. And here's the thing is I love to share awesome ideas like you have and all the other educators I have on the show, but every single educator is in different circumstances. And we all have to work to reach those kids right in front of us. Educators, out of all the years you've taught, this is probably the most important year you have ever taught. So keep at it. Your job is important. And thank you, Creative Dave, for all these wonderful ideas. I picked up some ideas I'm going to use with my kiddos.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me.
If you enjoyed today's 10-Minute Teacher podcast, why not subscribe on iTunes? You can also catch up with Vicki on Twitter at CoolCatTeacher or level up and learn with her blogs and free resources at CoolCatTeacher.com. Thanks for listening.